You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we preview the ICC T20 World Cup for 2022. It's the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, and let's get started. Let's have a look at India's T20 World Cup squad. Their captain is Rohit Sharma. They have won one ICC T20 World Cup title before. That was back in the first ever T20 World Cup in South Africa in 2007, when they won against Pakistan in the final. Their best result at last year's T20 World Cup for 2021 in the UAE, they finished in the Super 12 stage. The squad that they've selected for this year's T20 World Cup in Australia: Rohit Sharma, Rahul, Kohli, Suryakumar Yadav, Huda, Pant, Karthik, Hardik Pandya, Ashwin, Chahal, Axel Patel, Kumar, Harsha Patel, Ashdeep Singh, and Shami. That's the squad that India have selected for this year's T20 World Cup in Australia. India come into this T20 World Cup with lots of expectations and pressure after a very disappointing T20 World Cup last year in the UAE. Last year's T20 World Cup in the UAE, they won 3 games and lost 2 from Group 2 in the Super 12 stage. The first game against Pakistan, losing by 10 wickets, set the tone for the tournament. Then losing to New Zealand in their second game by 8 wickets set them back big time, and they weren't able to qualify for the semi-finals. Then they won against Afghanistan, Scotland, and Namibia, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to go through to the semi-finals. Didn't qualify for the semi-finals for a T20 World Cup for the first time since 2012 in that T20 World Cup in Sri Lanka. So a very disappointing T20 World Cup for India. This year's T20 World Cup in Australia, they'll be looking to do better in 2022. They have a strong squad, a good batting lineup, and a good bowling attack. But their bowling attack is undermanned, with Jasprit Bumrah being ruled out due to an injury. Mohammad Shami came into the squad to replace him. Also, India have some concerns going into this T20 World Cup in terms of their death bowling. No Bumrah in the side will hurt them. India has some problems with their death bowling, leaking runs, and not really doing well when it comes to their death bowling in T20 cricket in recent times. But their bowlers need to do better in this T20 World Cup. Kumar, Harsha Patel, Ashdeep Singh, Mohammad Shami will need to step up in Bumrah's absence if India are going to have success in this T20 World Cup. All of them are good T20 bowlers, but have been poor when it comes to bowling at the death. Also, this Indian bowling attack hasn't got the real express pace like Bumrah has. All similar pace. Need pace in Australia to really challenge the batters. So that's what India are lacking with Bumrah being out of the side. Number one, his death bowling those Yorkers at pace at the death. They're really going to miss that, India. They're also going to miss his pace. And you have a look at the bowlers that they've got: Kumar, Harsha Patel, Ashdeep Singh, Mohammad Shami. All of them are quite similar in pace. And are they going to really challenge the batters in this T20 World Cup in Australia on these good surfaces, which are good for batting? You need that extra pace to challenge the batters. So that's where India will struggle in 2 departments: the death bowling and the pace, to really upset the batters in this T20 World Cup. So I think for the Indian bowling lineup, they will really need to step up in the absence of Bumrah. The spinners will be the key as well for India. Ravi Ashwin, Chahal, Axel Patel will need to take wickets in the middle overs. If the main bowlers like Kumar, Harsha Patel, Ashdeep Singh, Mohammad Shami don't take any wickets in the power play, once the spinners come on and Ashwin or Chahal or Axel Patel, if they do get selected during this T20 World Cup, they will need to play a big role in terms of taking those wickets when needed for India, because they will need to play their role given the absence of Jasprit Bumrah in the side. So India definitely have a big challenge in the bowling department, the death bowling, and how to cover the absence of Jasprit Bumrah. Despite this problem, this is a strong Indian team. Strong batting lineup. You've got the likes of Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul. You've got Suryakumar Yadav. You've got Hardik Pandya. You've got KL Rahul. You've got Pant. You've got Dinesh Karthik, who's made a resurgence back into the Indian T20 side. India have a strong batting lineup, so their batters can score runs. Virat Kohli's back in form. They've got some very good batters who can definitely score runs when needed for India. But their bowling is definitely their weakest link in this team. So their bowlers will have to really step up, as I mentioned. So going to be a challenge for India, but I think this year's T20 World Cup will be different for them. I think they're a good chance to go through to the semis. They'll do much better than they did last year in the UAE. It's a different squad to the UAE. So I think for India, without Bumrah being here, it's going to be a big blow for them with their bowling. But their batting can certainly get them over the line if required. But the other bowlers will have to stand up in Bumrah's absence. But, I think India are a good chance of making it through to the semis in the final four. I think they'll do much better than they did in the UAE. Now, who's the player to look out for India? I'm going to go with Suryakumar Yadav. His rise to the top of the T20 national game has been remarkable. His batting is superb. He's had a great 2022 in T20 Nationals. Should be the leading run scorer for India in this T20 World Cup this year. Obviously, you've got other batters like Rohit Sharma, Rahul, Kohli in the side, even Hardik Pandya. But I think Suryakumar Yadav could top the run-scoring sheets for India in this T20 World Cup. He's going to be a very crucial batter for India in the batting lineup, and I think he's one of the players to look out for. So overall, India, a very good squad. Their batting's definitely their strongest suit. Their death bowling, the absence of Bumrah, that's really going to hurt them. So it'll be interesting to see how India go about things in this T20 World Cup. But you can't rule out India. They're one of the favourites to go through to the semi-finals. But let's see what India can do in this T20 World Cup in Australia. Let's have a look at Pakistan's T20 World Cup squad. Their captain is Babar Azam. They have won one ICC T20 World Cup title before. That was back in 2009 in England. Their best result at last year's T20 World Cup in the UAE in 2021, semi-finalists. The squad that they've selected for this T20 World Cup in Australia: Azam, Shadab Khan, Asif Ali, Zaman, Haider Ali, Rauf, Itakar Ahmed, Kushal Shah, Hassanain, Nawaz, Rizwan, Wasim, Naseem Shah, Shaheen Shah Afridi, and Masoon. That's the Pakistan squad that they've selected for this T20 World Cup in Australia. Pakistan have selected a good squad for this T20 World Cup in Australia. It's a squad full of T20 match winners with both bat and ball. But can this Pakistan squad win the T20 World Cup? That's the biggest question. Last year's tournament in the UAE, Pakistan had a great T20 World Cup. They topped Group 2 in the Super 12 stage. They won 5 of their 5 Super 12 matches to top the group and to qualify easily to the semi-finals. But once they reached the semi-final against Australia, it was a great game of cricket. But in the end, Pakistan fell short. Pakistan made 4 for 176. Australia chased down the runs, 5 for 177 with 1 over to spare. They went undefeated in the Super 12 stage, but couldn't win the semi-final, the game that mattered the most. Matthew Wade took the game away from Pakistan with his amazing finishing skills and guided Australia to a famous semi-final win. And then obviously Australia went on to win the final against New Zealand. Heading into this T20 World Cup for 2022, for Pakistan, it could be a very interesting T20 World Cup for Pakistan. They could be one of the teams to qualify for the semi-finals this year. It's a tough group in group number 2 of the Super 12s. They've got India and South Africa, I should say. Those are going to be tough opponents, so they will have to play well. I don't think they'll go undefeated this year like they did in the UAE. Obviously, different conditions, Australia to the UAE, obviously. So Pakistan will definitely won't find it a lot easier to try and go undefeated this year in Australia compared to the UAE. They're going to have many challenges as a team in this T20 World Cup, Pakistan. Now, some of the concerns that Pakistan have had going into this T20 World Cup is the heavy reliance on Babar Azam and Mohammad Rizwan. Pakistan rely heavily on Azam and Rizwan. Very good T20 opening partnership, as we know. Many 100-run partnerships in the T20s they've played together thus far. But when they get out early, the rest of the batting lineup from Pakistan struggle. The rest of the batters need to step up in this T20 World Cup. They can't rely on Mohammad Rizwan and Babar Azam to get them out off to a flyer. They will fail and will get out cheaply. So both Azam and Rizwan may need to have a good T20 World Cup to put Pakistan into strong positions. That's one challenge for Pakistan to overcome in this T20 World Cup, is how do they go about dealing with Azam and Rizwan if they don't get off to a flyer. Then the rest of the batting lineup will struggle and they will need to step up because, as I mentioned, they can't rely on them forever in terms of this tournament. Other players need to stand up. Yes, Babar Azam, Mohammad Rizwan, very good T20 World Cup, very good T20 batters. But the rest of the batting lineup need to step up because they can't do it all the time. And the reliance is so heavily relied on Azam and Rizwan to get Pakistan off to a good start. So the rest of the batting group will need to stand up in this T20 World Cup. The other challenge that Pakistan will face in this tournament is they're going to be tested on bouncy tracks. That's going to be another challenge for the Pakistan batters, is how do they go about playing on fast, bouncy tracks in Perth and Brisbane during this T20 World Cup. Now, they do play 2 games in Perth, Pakistan, but both of those games are against qualifiers. You would think they will win those games in Perth against the qualifiers. But, it's something for the batters to think about for Pakistan. How do they go about playing on those surfaces that are fast and bouncy? I think they'll handle them okay, but it's something that Pakistan will need to think of. Apart from that, they should do well in the other venues around Australia, like the MCG, the SCG, the Adelaide Oval. I think Pakistan will do okay in terms of getting used to the pitch conditions and that. But I think the 2 games in Perth against the qualifiers that they will play against in this T20 World Cup, you would think they'll win both of those games, but they will be definitely tested on those tracks in terms of where the bounce comes in quite sharply. And also there's a lot more pace on those surfaces in Perth and also in Brisbane. So that's something that they'll have to think about, Pakistan. They've got a strong bowling attack. They'll be boosted by Shaheen Shah Afridi's comeback into this side. Obviously, he was having a bit of problems with his knee. That seems to be okay now. So they'll be delighted to have him back. You've also got Hassanein, Wasim, Naseem Shah, who can bowl quick. So they've got a very exciting bowling attack, Pakistan. You've also got Shadab Khan as well. He's a very good spinner and a very good T20 bowler. So if Pakistan can be consistent in terms of their performances, then they're a good chance to qualify for the semi-finals in this T20 World Cup. It will depend on how they will go in terms of if Azam and Rizwan fail, can the rest of the batting lineup pick themselves up and get the team into a strong position? The bowlers will definitely take wickets, but it's up to the batters to score the runs. So if Pakistan can be consistent, then I think they're a good chance of going through to the semi-finals. We shall see what happens. And another thing for Pakistan is the fielding. The fielding needs to be good from Pakistan. As we know with Pakistan teams over the years, their fielding hasn't been their best discipline in the game. In this T20 World Cup, they will need to be a lot better in the field. If they do that, and if the batting can fire and the bowling can do what it does, take wickets, then I think they're a good chance of going through to the semi-finals. Who's the player to look out for Pakistan? I'm going to go with Babar Azam. I think he's a very good T20 World Cup, T20 batter, I should say, and he's going to have a very good T20 World Cup for 2022. His runs and his opening partnership with Mohammad Rizwan is going to be the key for Pakistan in terms of getting Pakistan off to a good start. His captaincy will be important as well. I think the way he leads the team is going to be important, how he rallies the team in terms of motivating them to do better and go out there and play like it's your last game. That's going to be important. But he's one of the players to look out for me in terms of the Pakistan team in this T20 World Cup. I think he's going to be the leading run scorer for Pakistan in this T20 World Cup, and I think Mohammad Rizwan will be probably in second place or maybe in first place. We don't know, but he's definitely going to have a big impact on this Pakistan team in this World Cup, that's for sure. Overall, if Pakistan have a consistent performance in this T20 World Cup across their Super 12 matches, as I mentioned before, and if the batting and the bowling can fire, then there are definitely a good chance of going through to the semi-finals. If not, it could be a tough tournament for Pakistan. But Pakistan are a good team. Let's see what they can do in this T20 World Cup in Australia. Let's have a look at South Africa's T20 World Cup squad, and their captain is Temba Bavuma. They have not won an ICC T20 World Cup as yet. Last year's best result at last year's T20 World Cup in 2021 in the UAE, they finished in the Super 12 stage. The squad that they've selected for this year's T20 World Cup in Australia: Bavuma, De Kock, Klaassen, Hendricks, Maharaj, Markram, Miller, Ngidi, Nokia, Parnell, Rabada, Rasool, Shamsi, Stubbs, and Janssen. South Africa will be looking to bounce back and make amends after just missing the semi-finals in the 2021 T20 World Cup on net run rate. Last year's tournament, they did very well, despite people saying they would not qualify for the semi-finals or do that well in last year's tournament. But they proved everyone wrong, and they had a pretty reasonable tournament in the end. In Group 1 in the Super 12 stage, they finished with 4 wins and 1 loss. They tied with Australia and England on 4 wins and 1 loss. Missed out on net run rate to qualify for the semi-finals. The game against Bangladesh cost them in terms of their net run rate. They bowled Bangladesh out for 84, and they chased down the runs in 13.3 overs, finishing on 4 for 86. They needed to chase the runs down a lot quicker to boost their net run rate, and if they would have done that, there would have been a good chance of going through to the semis. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be for South Africa. Coming into this T20 World Cup this year, they have a good squad, powerful batters, fast bowlers, capable of scoring runs and taking wickets with both their batting and their bowling groups. But they are going to come up with a lot of challenges, and they are going to have some challenges ahead of them in this T20 World Cup, I should say, for South Africa. But can they break the hoodoo and finally win an ICC tournament? That is the question. Questions on the captain's form in terms of Bavuma's form. Needs to start scoring runs in this T20 World Cup for South Africa. He's been under pressure leading up to this T20 World Cup in terms of his form. South Africa played a T20 series in India. He didn't really do well in that T20 series. He wasn't picked up at the auction for South Africa's new T20 franchise league. So some concerns here for Temba Bavuma as captain. He will need to score some runs and contribute to this South African team. South Africa have a good team, but can they put in consistent performances in this T20 World Cup to qualify and break the hoodoo once and for all? As I mentioned, they've got a lot of T20 players who are very good in terms of the batting and bowling side of things. But they will need to be consistent, South Africa. They're in a tough group. They're up against India, Pakistan. They're going to be tough opponents for them in Group 2 of this Super 12 stage. So South Africa will be tested. They'll face a lot of challenges. Is this team good enough to overcome those challenges and really perform on the biggest stage, which is the T20 World Cup? We shall see what happens in this tournament from them. Who's the player to look out for South Africa? I'm going to go with David Miller, powerful striker of a cricket ball. South Africa will need him and the other powerful strikers to have a good T20 World Cup. He may be the leading run scorer for South Africa in this T20 World Cup. Scored a good century against India recently in that run chase where South Africa were chasing 200 odd. He was able to score 100 and nearly got South Africa over the line in that match. So he's definitely going to be a very important batter for South Africa in this T20 World Cup, David Miller. He can definitely set up South Africa in good positions in terms of trying to set a total and a target, or trying to chase down a target in a run chase. So David Miller, for me, is going to be the player that I'll be looking out for South Africa in this T20 World Cup. Overall, South Africa have a good squad for this T20 World Cup. It's just a matter of if they can be consistent. Can they perform on a consistent basis? Can they perform when the pressure is really on them? That will be the question that they will have to try and answer. But you can never discount them from being competitive and trying to make an effort in terms of qualifying for the semi-finals. But they'll face plenty of challenges in this T20 World Cup, South Africa. But they've got some good players. It's just a matter of when they can really perform when it counts under pressure. So that will be the question for South Africa. But South Africa, they've got some good T20 players. All that South Africa need to do is try and perform at their best and hopefully make a good run for the semi-finals. But we shall see what happens from South Africa in this T20 World Cup in Australia. Let's have a look at Bangladesh's T20 World Cup squad. Their captain is Shakib Al Hasan. They have not won an ICC T20 World Cup as yet. Their best result at last year's T20 World Cup in the UAE in 2021, they finished in the Super 12 stage. The squad they have selected for this T20 World Cup this year in Australia: Al Hasan, Afif, Hussain, Abadot Hussain, Mahmud, Das, Miraz, Mossadegh Hussain, Rahman, Shanto, Ahmed, Hassan, Islam, Saka, Taskin Ahmed, and Ali. That's the squad that Bangladesh have selected for this T20 World Cup in Australia. This T20 World Cup could be a tough tournament for Bangladesh. Last year's tournament in the UAE, they had to qualify from the first round, and they were able to qualify for the Super 12 stage. In Group B of the first round of last year's T20 World Cup to qualify for the Super 12 stage, they won 2 games and lost 1. They lost that game to Scotland by 6 runs. The Super 12 stage in Group 1, they lost all 5 games, and it wasn't really a good tournament from Bangladesh. They had big expectations heading into the T20 World Cup last year, but those expectations and the pressure got to them, and they weren't able to perform at their best. This year's World Cup, T20 World Cup in Australia, could be a similar T20 World Cup as it was in 2021, heading into 2022. Going to be tough for Bangladesh to be competitive and hopefully make a case for the semi-finals. So for Bangladesh, it's going to be a tough T20 World Cup for them, but for Bangladesh, it's all about trying to be competitive. Let's go out there, have some fun. Let's try and get better, look to improve. And I think that will be the goal from Bangladesh in this T20 World Cup this year. The player to look out for Bangladesh, I'm going to go with the captain, Shakib Al Hasan. A good player for many years for Bangladesh. Good T20 player, good all-rounder with both bat and ball. Needs to step up with both bat and ball for Bangladesh. If Bangladesh are going to be competitive in this T20 World Cup, he will need to have a good tournament. So overall, it's a tough T20 World Cup for Bangladesh this year in terms of making an impact or even winning some games in the Super 12 stage. They're definitely going to be tested against India, Pakistan, and South Africa in Group 2, and are definitely going to find it tough to try and win a game or even try and make a case for the semi-finals. So for Bangladesh, it's going to be a tough T20 World Cup, but let's hope they can show some competitiveness, go out there and really show everyone some of the skillful players that they have in this Bangladesh cricket team. Let's predict who's going to qualify for the semi-finals of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2022. Who will win this ICC T20 World Cup for 2022? Who will be the leading run scorer? And who will be the leading wicket taker for the tournament? Now, let's talk about the semi-finals. As I have mentioned throughout this preview of this T20 World Cup, there are so many teams that can compete and qualify for the semi-finals and challenge each other. You've got Australia, England, India, Pakistan. You would think those are the favourites to go through. You've got other teams like, South Africa, that could cause a few upsets. Afghanistan as well, that can cause a few problems and surprises. So it is definitely going to be interesting to see who will qualify for those 4 spots. As we know, in T20 cricket, it's unpredictable, and whatever we predict is probably not going to turn out right. But let's try and predict and guess and predict who's going to make it to the semis in this T20 World Cup. So my predictions for the top 4 semi-finalists of this ICC T20 World Cup for this year. I got to go with Australia. It's at home. They're the favourites. Yes, they do have some problems leading into this tournament. But as we know, Australia are a very good tournament side. And I think they'll come good. And you will probably think they'll qualify into the semi-finals. So I'm going to go with Australia. The next team, I'm going to go with England. I think England are a good chance of going through. Once again, they have a strong side. They can definitely challenge. They've got a strong batting lineup. Their bowlers will be tested, though, due to the lack of pace, and all that stuff. But, I think they're good enough to try and make it through to the semis. So I'm going to go with England. Then I'm going to go with India. Now, I know India have some problems with their death bowling and all that stuff. No Bumrah. Everyone's saying, well, they probably won't qualify again for the second year in a row. But I think it will be different this time from India. I think they'll play much better cricket. They've got a very good batting lineup who's firing and scoring runs. Their bowlers are very good T20 bowlers, but they will be challenged without Bumrah being in the bowling attack. But you would think India are good enough to qualify from Group 2 into the semi-finals. So I'm going to go with India. The last team, I'm going to go with Pakistan. And I think Pakistan can definitely challenge. As I mentioned in this preview when talking about Pakistan, if they can get it together with both bat and ball and be consistent and be very good in the field as well, then they're a good chance of going through to this semi-final in this T20 World Cup. But it will depend on if they are consistent in terms of their batting and bowling. They're a very good team. They've got a lot of match winners. They've got Babar Azam, they've got Mohammad Rizwan, who are very good T20 batters. Their opening partnership is crucial for them. They've got skillful bowlers and Shaheen Shah Afridi, Naseem Shah, etc. The list goes on. And I think they could make it through to the final four again, as they did in last year's T20 World Cup in the UAE. So my top 4 teams for the semi-finals: Australia, England, India, Pakistan. But as I said, these are just predictions that could be entirely wrong, but let's see what happens. T20 cricket, anything can happen. Now, who's going to win this ICC T20 World Cup for 2022? Oh, as I mentioned, there's so many teams that could win. I'm going to go with Australia. I think at home, they're good enough to win back-to-back titles. I really do. They're a strong team. They're a good team. They play well in tournaments. They're the red-hot favourites. Everyone's talking about them. Yes, they've had some problems leading into the tournament, but it doesn't really matter what's happened before the tournament starts. And we know with Australia, they're a very good tournament team. When they're under pressure, when they play in a tournament of some sort, a 50-over World Cup or a T20 World Cup, they know what to do. And no doubt they'll probably solve all the problems and, have a very good T20 World Cup. But I think they could be the potential winners of this year's tournament and go back-to-back at home. Now, who's going to be the leading run scorer of this T20 World Cup this year? You got so many brilliant batters from all of the countries. It's your sport for choice, really. Oh, it's difficult to choose one. But if I had to choose one, I'm going to go with someone who's probably not going to be spoken very highly of, unlike other batters, but I'm going to go with Suryakumar Yadav from India. I think Sky's going to have a great T20 World Cup. I think he's going to score the most runs. I think he's going to be up there with, and definitely topping the list of this tournament. You've got Babar Azam, you've got Rizwan, you've got, other batters from other countries, Rohit Sharma, Kohli, you've got Maxwell, you've got, Warner, you sport for choice. But I'm going to go with Suryakumar Yadav. I think he's going to have a great tournament with the bat, and I think he's going to do well. Let's see if he can do it. But as I said, these are just predictions, and could be entirely wrong, but let's see what happens. Leading wicket taker for this year's T20 World Cup, I'm going to go with Josh Hazlewood. I know there's some other great bowlers there. You've got Mitchell Starc, you've got Shaheen Shah Afridi, you've got Trent Bolt. You've got some brilliant bowlers in this T20 World Cup. But I think with Josh Hazlewood, he's a brilliant T20 bowler. He's going to be a very important bowler for Australia in this T20 World Cup. I think he's going to play a very important role for this Australian team in trying to defend their title and go back-to-back. But I think he's going to have a great T20 World Cup with the ball. Yes, there's Mitchell Starc in the Australian team as well, and you could say he may top the list as well, but I think with Josh, he's always reliable. He can take wickets when needed. So I think he could top the list. But, as I said before, it's another prediction. I could be entirely wrong, but, let's see what happens in this T20 World Cup. Those are my predictions for this ICC T20 World Cup for 2022. If you're listening to this episode of the podcast on YouTube, let us know in the comments, who do you think will qualify for the semi-finals? Who will win this ICC T20 World Cup for 2022? Who will be the leading run scorer? And who will be the leading wicket taker for the tournament? It would be great to hear your predictions and thoughts. This ICC T20 World Cup for 2022 is sure to be one of the most exciting T20 World Cups ever. Australia come into this ICC T20 World Cup for 2022 as one of the favourites, and they have a good chance of winning the tournament at home. The defending champions will be hard to beat. But there are so many other teams who can win this T20 World Cup, and as we know in T20 cricket, it's an unpredictable game. Let's hope we see a competitive and exciting ICC T20 World Cup for 2022 in Australia, and let's hope many people turn out to watch and support their teams during the tournament. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get the latest episodes of the podcast, and like and share our Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Until next time, keep safe, and bye for now.